The wind crawled over the heather that lined the narrow road, carrying the scent of cold iron and distant rain. It was a breath from another time, slow and deliberate, like the exhalation of the earth itself. The heather bent under its weight, whispers rising in the brittle grass, as if the ground sought to speak in voices only the lost could hear. Somewhere far beyond, a crow wheeled low, its ragged cry ripped apart by silence so thick it seemed stitched into the very soil beneath weary feet. Stones, worn smooth by generations of passing souls, glimmered faintly with frost beneath the dying light of a sun bleeding into a grey sky. Yet there were no footsteps now, no thud of hooves, no creak of wooden wheels bearing grain, no soft murmur of pilgrims' prayers swallowed by the wind. Only the road stretched forward, a serpentine thread disappearing into a bend where shadows gathered like conspirators huddled in whispered council. This road was once a thoroughfare, a vein pulsing with the life of travelers, merchants cloaked in threadbare wool, faces etched with the grime of distant towns, pilgrims clutching rosary beads, their lips moving in silent devotion, messengers with letters sealed in red wax, bearing words meant to alter fates. They all passed into that bend. None returned. Not even the torn scraps of leather shoes or the iron rims of wheels left a trace. The earth swallowed them whole, silent and unyielding, without a cough, a stain, or a sigh. This was not mere abandonment but erasure, the kind of void that gnaws at memory itself. The villagers, those few who still dared speak, told no tales. Here 4 tales demand an end, and this road gave none. It was as if time recoiled from this place, recoiled as though the earth itself barred the way. Near the roadside, a weathered cross leans crookedly into the biting wind, its wood cracked and scarred by centuries-old chisel marks, testament to prayers muttered beneath trembling breath. But at its base there is nothing, no offerings of bread or wine, no tokens of the dead, no shells pilgrims once left to honor the passage of souls. The silence here was not empty but deliberate, like a door barred from within, like a grave left unmarked and forgotten. The old reeve, his face carved deep by years of frost and sorrow, remembers a time, some 20 winters past, when the bishop himself ordered a procession of priests to bless this cursed road. They came wrapped in velvet robes, banners embroidered with gold thread fluttering in the chill air. Censers heavy with incense swung from their hands, releasing tendrils of smoke that coiled like restless serpents toward the darkening sky. They chanted psalms, their voices rising in solemn harmony, a prayer to hold back the shadows, to call forth mercy and light. But when the last echo faded and the smoke thinned into the cold air, the priests themselves vanished. Their relics, a silver crucifix, a vial of holy oil, a carved ivory comb once belonging to a saint, were never seen again. Lost to that dark bend as surely as those before them. Now the road waits, patient and watchful. It is not abandoned. It is guarded by something older than memory, older than man. The hawthorn thickets that edge the path have grown thick and thorny, their twisted branches clawing at the air like desperate fingers. No hoofprints mark the mud even after the spring thaw, and the shepherds dare not graze their flocks near its edges, fearing the silence that breathes there. Sometimes, on the coldest mornings, a faint line of footprints appears in the frost, bare feet. Too small for a man, too narrow for a woman, leading only toward the bend. The old women cross themselves and whisper prayers, for they say those prints belong not to the living but to something else, something caught between this world and the next. Some swear that on moonless nights, when stars hide behind thick clouds, a faint lantern light flickers just beyond the bend. It sways and beckons with a hollow glow, a siren song to the weary and the lost. No one has followed its haunting dance in decades. Yet once, a boy of 15, reckless and brave beyond his years, took it into his mind to prove the road harmless. He carried nothing but a loaf of rye bread and his father's hunting knife, the blade dull but steady in his grasp. At dawn, the knife was found beside the bend, clean as untouched steel, the loaf still whole. The boy's name has not been spoken since, swallowed by the same silence that claims the travelers. The road does not kill, it does not wound, it erases. Erasure leaves no mark to weep over, no body to bury, no story to tell. It is a maw without hunger, a shadow without form, and in its quiet, unyielding void, it harbors a secret older than the stones beneath travelers' feet. The memory of those lost haunts the village, like smoke from a dying hearth that never quite disappears. Mothers pull their children close when the wind howls through broken windows. Fathers cast wary eyes at the distant bend as twilight gathers. Some speak of curses, others of ancient sins buried deep in the soil, sins older than the very kingdom itself. But no truth can pierce the stillness. No answer can undo the silence that reigns here. The earth keeps its secrets, and the road waits on the village tavern. By firelight that flickers like a ghost's breath, the old stories slip between cracked mugs and worn hands. The reeve speaks of a man who once set out to chart the road, a scholar with books full of maps and a mind brimming with reason. He went alone, confident in his knowledge, but his journal was found months later, torn and waterlogged. Its pages held nothing but scratchings, a single word scrawled again and again in desperate loops, gone. The scholar's fate remains a mystery, like the road itself, swallowed by the invisible dot at night. The road seems to breathe, a slow inhale that stirs the dust, and a soft exhale that chills the bones. The heather sways as if whispering a lament. The crows circle endlessly, their cries echoing the sorrow of vanished souls. The road becomes a mirror to the unseen, a place where the veil between worlds thins, where the living brush against the forgotten. It is said that the road is not a path but a threshold, a border between the world we know and a realm of shadow and memory, where time folds and the past never quite dies. Those who step beyond its bend are caught in that twilight, lost to the world of men, becoming whispers in the wind or the chill beneath the moonlight. And so the road waits, silent, patient, eternal, a dark thread woven into the tapestry of the land, a scar upon the soul of the village. Travelers no longer dare approach, and the villagers speak of it only in hushed tones, eyes lowered and prayers whispered. But the road remains unchanged, unyielding, watching. It waits for the next soul, brave enough or foolish enough to vanish into its depths, leaving behind no relics, no footprints, no name. Only the silence, endless and profound. As the twilight deepens, a thin mist rises from the heather, curling around the weathered cross like a shroud. The last light fades, and the road disappears into shadow. A gaping maw ready to swallow the next traveler whole, and beneath the fading stars, the crow wheels low once more, its cry swallowed by the silence that is stitched into the very soil. The first sound was the creak of leather straps, sharp and insistent in the heavy silence. The dull clink of iron buckles answered in a slow rhythm, like a heartbeat muted beneath a shroud. With each step of the mule, the cart shifted gently. wood groaning under the weight of secrets it carried. Brother Elfric walked beside it, his sandals stirring faint sighs of dust on the narrow road. The morning dew clung like cold breath to the wild grass and cobblestones, glistening pale under a sky that had yet to fully awaken. He had trod this path many times before, a pilgrim not by choice but by duty, carrying bread from the abbeys, oven to the scattered hamlet beyond the hill. The scent of baking lingered on his skin, warm crust and yeast, the promise of life against the harshness of the world. Yet today, something was wrong. The air lay thick and too still, as if the trees themselves held their breath, watching, waiting. The usual chorus of morning birdsong was swallowed by an unnatural hush. Even the mule's steps, steady and sure, seemed muffled beneath the heavy dust, as though the earth itself drank the sounds and swallowed them whole. Brother Elf fingers tightened around the mule's rein. The cart before him carried more than bread this time. Beneath a linen shroud, stained faintly with the smoke of candles and incense, rested a reliquary carved from dark oak, its surface worn smooth by centuries of prayers and hands trembling with faith. Within, the relic it held was said to be Saint Veriman's right hand bone, the very hand that had blessed a village ravaged by plague, calling life back from death's cold grasp. The abbot had sent this sacred talisman to sanctify the cursed road, to hold back the creeping shadow that had swallowed so many souls. The tales were whispered low in the abbey's stone corridors, vanishing without trace, of a hollow silence left in their wake. The novice monks had laughed when they first heard the story, their youthful voices echoing against the vaulted ceilings, too bright to believe in such darkness. But the laughter died with the baker, whose cart was found abandoned beneath the old elm, with the smith's daughter, who vanished at dusk after crossing the river, with the knight last seen sharpening his sword as though preparing for a journey he would never complete. No bodies, no scraps of cloth, no broken blade, only emptiness where life had been. A cold shiver traced Brother Elfric's spine as the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of damp wool, though his own robe was dry against the chill. Ahead, the bend in the road loomed nearer than it should, curling like a black tongue into the forest's shadow. He glanced back toward the last house he had passed, their thatched roofs swallowed already by the morning mist, like ghosts dissolving. Into the air, the silence pressed closer still. The birds had vanished, as though the world itself held its breath in dread. The mule slowed, hesitating. A low sound rose from the earth beneath the cart, not words, not cries, but a grinding murmur like a millstone turning deep within the soil. The carved saints etched into the reliquary's side seemed to watch with mute warning, their faces worn but fierce in the dim light. Elfric's breath caught, the air itself tightening around his chest as if the road exhaled a cold, invisible hand. Then, just beyond the curve, a lantern flickered soft, swaying in a dance to rhythmic, too deliberate to be a candle carried by a shepherd. The light moved without footsteps, a ghostly glow that beckoned and repelled all at once. Elfric told himself it was a trick of the eye, a flutter of mist playing with the weak dawn. But the lantern burned steady, cold as a distant star, suspended in the shadowed bend like a silent sentinel. He took a step forward. Then too, the weight of the reliquary suddenly unbearable in his grasp. The mule stamped nervously, ears twitching toward the unseen. Elfric's heart thundered in the stillness, each beat a drum of fear and faith wrestling within him. The road seemed to breathe, the trees leaning close as if to listen, to judge, and then the light vanished. Night fell fast, and heavy like a velvet cloak. The abbey waited in silence, prayers held tight in trembling hands. When dawn came, another brother was sent to find Ælfric. The mule was found grazing by the roadside, its harness carefully folded atop the loaves of bread, untouched and cold. But the reliquary was gone, vanished, as if it had never been. The grass where it had rested lay flattened, a patch of earth pressed by many, neither silent, reverent, or desperate. The abbot ordered prayers for Ælfric's soul, though no grave would mark the place where he was lost. The monks lit candles and whispered his name into the shadows of the chapel, hoping the light might reach beyond the veil. But the road waits still, silent and patient. It stretches onward, a dark thread weaving through the heart of the land, a wound that time refuses to heal. Travelers no longer dare approach the bend. Villagers speak of it only in fearful whispers, eyes cast down and breath held tight. Some say the road is cursed, others that it is haunted by the restless dead. Yet none can say why it takes what it does, why it leaves no trace but absence. It is a threshold, a veil between worlds, a place where the known slips into the forgotten. The earth here is thin, the boundary blurred, and those who step beyond its curve fall into a silence deeper than death at night. When the moon hides behind thick clouds and the wind dies to a whisper, a faint lantern flame can be seen flickering. At the Bendan, eternal beacon for the lost and the damned. And beneath that cold, watchful light, the road waits for the next soul to vanish, salient, hungry, eternal. The causeway lay draped in mist, a fragile spine of ancient oak stretching across the fens like a silent, darkened scar. Each plank, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrim feet and merchant carts, seemed to breathe with a memory older than the kingdoms themselves. In the fading light of a chill autumn afternoon, the wood gleamed faintly with frost, the edges slick and shining like wet glass. The air was thick with the peat smoke from distant fires and the sharp temps of wild garlic growing wild on the marshes. Edge, a hollow wind whispered through the reeds, carrying the scent of damp earth and forgotten things. Here, the world held its breath. Sir Roderick rode this causeway once. His armor was newly polished, a mirror to the low, grey sky, each plate catching what little light the sun spared. The red hound emblazoned upon his banner snapped in the wind, a fierce promise of loyalty and honor that had guided him from the day he was knighted. That morning, he had been a man made of resolve and steel, bound by duty to escort a merchant caravan south to the great Ferran event promised to bring coin and grain alike to his lord's coffers. Witnesses spoke of the proud, steady clatter of his horse's hooves against the oak, breath blooming white in the crisp air. But as dusk sank low, swallowing all sight and sound, neither knight nor horse nor caravan remained to answer the coming night. The marsh was silent. The reeds did not bend. The water did not ripple. No trace of wheel, boot, or cloth disturbed. The endless quiet. It was as if the earth itself had opened and swallowed them whole, pulling them down into some endless dark where no candle could reach. Whispers filled the villages beyond the fens. The fen, some said, was a patient predator, ancient and slow, waiting beneath the murky waters and treacherous bog to claim any who dared disturb its stillness. But those who truly knew the marsh spoke differently. They said the causeway held firm, its oak planks set deep by long dead hands, unyielding to storm or flood. No mud could claim it, no rain could drown it. They said it was no bog or mire that took Sir Roderick and his company. It was something older, something hidden beneath centuries of moss and memory. The road was laid upon the bones of a forgotten tribe, a people whose names had vanished into the mist of time. Their burial path had been desecrated by the spreading kingdoms, their dead uprooted and trampled beneath commerce and conquest. But the dead, the villagers whispered in hushed tones, never truly rest. The causeway was their haunt, their vigil. They walked still, reclaiming what was theirs, demanding offerings and blood or silence from any who dared cross without reverence. Oswin, the ferryman, was one who claimed to have seen them, a stooped old man with eyes as grey as the fen's sky. He told his tale by the fire, his voice rough as the peat smoke curling from his pipe. He said, one mist-thick morning, as dawn bled weak and white across the marsh, he saw shapes moving over the boards, silent hooded figures gliding without a sound, neither horse nor man, but something between the living and the lost. They passed, the mile markers like shadows, drifting toward the bend where the road disappeared into the black waters beyond. Oswin watched until the fog swallowed them whole, and the world became nothing but mist and breath. The memory of Sir Roderick lingered, like a shadow cast long and deep. His banner was found weeks later, folded carefully in the porch of the village church, its red hound staring cold and accusing from the folds. Beside it lay a pair of worn boots, too small and too narrow for any man known in the parish. The vicar, pale and trembling with a fever of fear and piety, burned the boots that very night, hoping to burn away the curse that had fallen upon the road. Yet even that holy flame could not cleanse the air of dread that clung to the causeway. Storms would come rolling over the fen with thunder and wind that tore through the reeds like spectral claws. On those nights, when the sky was a bruised purple and the earth itself seemed to shudder, villagers claimed to hear the faint clatter of hooves over the oak plank surgent, fleeting, always moving toward the bend where the road vanished beneath. The black water, some said it was Sir Roderick, still riding, bound forever to the lost path, a sentinel caught between worlds. In the great halls beyond the fen, the tale grew twisted with time. Lords spoke of the curse that hung over the marsh, a warning whispered beneath their breaths as they raised goblets in flickering torchlight. Merchants dared not speak of the road lest they tempt the shadow's hunger. The people who lived in the villages near the fens learned to cross themselves at sunset and leave small offerings, ashes of salt, scraps of bread upon the mossy stones near the road's start, hoping to appease what lurked unseen. Yet, despite these measures, the disappearances continued, travelers vanishing without a trace, their names fading like mist at dawn. Mothers grieved sons who never returned. Wives wept for husbands swallowed by silence. Each loss carved a hollow deep into the heart of the land, a wound that would not close. Some said the causeway was a threshold, a place where the veil between worlds thinned like worn parchment, fragile and ready to tear. It was a crossroads of the living and the dead, a path that led not forward, but down into the dark roots of the earth where old powers waited. The burial path beneath the planks was no ordinary grave, it was a prison, a trap, and a curse. To walk, it was to invite the past to reclaim what was once stolen. One cold dawn, a group of pilgrims dared to cross, cloaked in coarse wool and clutching wooden crosses. They stepped carefully onto the slick planks. Their prayers hung in the air, fragile threads woven against the creeping silence. For a time, they moved with steady hearts, voices rising in muted chant. But when they reached the bend, a heavy fog rolled in, swallowing sound and sight alike. The last of their prayers faltered, and one by one they vanished, no cry, no struggle, just the soft sigh of peat smoke drifting in the still air. The causeway remained, empty yet alive with whispered dread. It waited, patient and watchful, a guardian of secrets no living soul was meant to know. The dead had marked their territory, and none who crossed it came back unchanged. The marsh around it seemed to pulse with memory, each read a finger pointing. Each gust of wind a mournful breath. The smell of wet iron carried on the breeze was no accident. It was the scent of forgotten battles, spilled blood, and promises broken beneath skies long vanished. A lone traveler, wrapped in threadbare cloak, once dared to camp beside the causeway. In the depths of night, when the moon hid behind heavy clouds and the world was swallowed by shadow, he awoke to the sound of distant hooves. His heart pounding, he peered into the mist and saw a flickering lantern light swaying just beyond the bend, beckoning, elusive and cold as the grave. He rose, shaking, but when he stepped forward, the light vanished into the mist as though it had never been. He left at dawn, his face pale and haunted, carrying nothing but a silence heavier than the fog. His tale joined the chorus of whispered warnings, a new thread woven into the tapestry of fear that clung to the causeway. In the years that followed, the road became a legend, a whispered terror passed down by firelight and hushed voices. Children dared one another to touch the worn planks, only to flee at the first chill that ran down their spines. Farmers avoided the marsh's edge, lest the dead reach out with cold fingers to claim them. The church decreed, the road cursed, a place where prayers met only silence. Yet still, the causeway held its place, black and unyielding, a dark spine stretching over the marsh, a reminder of what lurked beneath the thin skin of the world. The past was never truly gone here. It waited, patient and unrelenting, ready to claim the next soul who dared to walk the path. And so the fens keep their secret, wrapped in fog and silence. The causeway, a threshold between life and death, memory and oblivion. The red hound of Sir Roderick's banner fades slowly into legend, but the road remains, watching, a quiet horror beneath the reeds and the cold stars. What waits beyond the bend, no one knows. But those who listen to the wind, who watch the flicker of distant lanterns on moonless nights, understand one truth with a clarity as sharp as a blade's edge. Some roads lead not to safety or home, but into the waiting arms of darkness itself. And so the causeway endures, a path not to be walked but remembered, a scar upon the earth and a shadow upon the soul. The mist clings to the oak planks, thick and relentless, as the faint echo of hooves fades into the distance. The causeway waits, as it always has, poised on the edge of worlds, ready to swallow all who cross its ancient bones. The journey continues beyond the bend, where light dies and shadows claim their own. The sky that day hung low and heavy, an unyielding slab of iron grey, so thick it seemed to smother the very breath from the world. Each inhalation Marjorie drew was a blade against her throat, sharp and biting, urging her hood tighter across. Her face, the fur lining brushed cold against her cheeks, a fragile warmth against the encroaching chill. Beside her, her son trudged, small and earnest, carrying a bundle wrapped carefully in rough cloth rushlights, meant for St. Cuthwold's shrine, where pilgrims whispered that the sick found healing and the broken found mercy. This was no first journey for Marjorie. She had crossed this frozen path twice before. Yet today, beneath the oppressive sky, the road seemed different, thicker with shadow, older with silence. The ground beneath their boots cracked with frost, brittle and white as bone. The track stretched out, a narrow ribbon worn through the winter fields. Now bare and brittle, the earth drawn tight beneath a hard crust. On either side, furrows lay empty, dark lines etched against the pale soil once fertile, now resigned. Too cold, the boy hummed softly, a lullaby his father had taught him in gentler days, and for a while, their footsteps marked the only statizing rhythmic, steady, a fragile thread tying them to this frozen world as they neared the ancient boundary. Stone, Marjorie's pace slowed, the bundle of rushlights cradled close to her chest. The slab rose from the earth, dark and weathered, its surface carved with looping glyphs no living tongue remembered. The symbols breathed of forgotten rites and vanished peoples, older than the village, older than any cross or bell tower. The wind fell away suddenly as they reached this sentinel of stone. No longer pressing hard against her back, it was as if the world beyond this mark was sealed under glassy land, unmoving, untouched by breath or time. She urged herself forward, though a quiet dread settled deep in her bones. The shrine lay only an hour ahead, an hour to the mercy she prayed for. Yet, as the road dipped between two low ridges, the air shifted again. A scent rose faint at first, the dampness of wool soaked through by rain, the acrid temps of burnt pitch, and beneath it, a strange sweetness like wildflowers kept too long in a jar, wilting in their own breath. The boy fell silent. His small hand tightened around the hem of her skirt, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. There, standing in the middle of the path, was a figure. A man, she thought, though his form seemed stitched from shadow rather than flesh. His hood was drawn low, swallowing his face in darkness deeper than the frosted dawn. Marjorie called out softly, a greeting to pierce the cold stillness. The figure did not answer, not a shift of breath, not a stir of cloth. It remained unmoving as a carved idol. In the mist, step by cautious step, Marjorie moved forward, the crunch of her boots loud in the quiet. The boy clung closer, fear pooling in the widening gap between mother and child. Then the figure turned not by the slow turning of a head, but as though the air itself swirled and twisted around him. No face emerged, only a void that drank the pale light, leaving a hollow where warmth and life might have been, without a sound. He stepped aside, sinking into the ditch where reeds curled like spectral fingers. The mist swallowed him whole. Marjorie's breath caught. She blinked, and where the stranger had been, there was only cold earth and frostbitten grass. A cold fear seeped into her bones. She called again for her son, but the lullaby was gone, vanished with the figure and the breathless silence. Her hand closed tight around the bundle of rushlights, now heavy, slick as if plucked from a pond. By the time she reached the bend where the road vanished into marsh, the boy was gone. No footprints, no echo of small steps in the frost, only the wet cloth clutched in her trembling fingers. Days later, the priest found her kneeling before the boundary stone. Her hands were raw, bleeding from clutching the rushlights too tightly, the cloth frayed and sodden. She whispered to him, her voice cracked like dry earth, speaking of her son as if he still walked beside her. She asked if she might light the candles now, though the offering had never been made. The shrine remained dark that year, the rushlights untouched by flame, the prayers of a mother swallowed by a silence deeper than the marsh itself. Some say the boundary stone marks a veil between this world and the next, that beyond it, the old powers linger still, the forgotten dead watching and waiting beneath the peat and mud. The air grows thick there, heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. In those silent moments, as frost glazes the ground and breath hangs in cold clouds. One wonders if the boy's lullaby still wanders the fen carried on the wind, a whisper of hope lost to shadow. What took him? Was it the marsh, patient and unyielding? Or something older, a restless hunger woven into the bones beneath the earth? Marjorie's story is not alone here. The fens keep their secrets, and their silence is not empty. It holds grief and loss, and the slow turning of time that refuses to let go. As winter loosens its grip, and the first thaw begins to seep into the soil, the road awaits those who dare to walk its length again, past the boundary stone, past the shadowed figure, to where the past and present fold together like smoke curling through the reeds. And there, beneath the pale sky, the next chapter waits, whispered in the footsteps that vanish without trace, and the faintest sound of a mother's prayer lost on the wind. The market was alive with clamor and color as the sun climbed high, spilling gold over muddy ruts and splintered wheels. The road throbbed with life. Oxen groaned under burdens, their harnesses creaking in rhythm with the lowing beasts. The scent of roasted chestnuts wove with the sharp tang of ale spilled from wooden cups, mingling with the dusty earth beneath crowded stalls. Merchants shouted over one another, voices sharp as flint, bargaining fiercely for pence and barter. Children darted between legs, clutching handfuls of sweetmeats or crude wooden toys, laughter ringing out like fragile bells. Yet, beneath the day's boisterous surface, a shadow lingered, one unnoticed by most, felt only by those who had learned fear on these roads. As dusk draped its heavy cloak across the land, the market's heart slowed, stalls shuttered with worn boards, and carts creaked away, wheels rattling over stone and mud toward distant villages. The chatter faded, leaving only the sigh of the wind through crooked hedgerows and the slow, mournful cry of the last crows settling in gnarled trees. The road emptied as swiftly as a candle guttering out in the chill. It was then, beneath the thickening dusk, that a different silence took hold, one heavy with dread and unspeakable stories. For years, too many had vanished between the last milestone and the ruin known only as the watchtower. This skeletal relic rose from the earth like a broken tooth, its stones cracked, its roof long caved in, ironwork twisted and rusted into fragile lace that clung desperately to fractured beams. Built in the violent times when kings waged endless border wars, it once guarded a frontier now forgotten, standing sentinel over a landscape as scarred and silent as the bones buried beneath its ground. On a bitter winter's eve, the air so cold it stung lungs and froze breath mid-exhale, a tanner named Leofric set out late from the fair. His cart was heavy with the rich, dark hides of beasts slain for leather slabs, of life laid bare and waiting to be transformed. He passed the miller's porch just after vespers, his lantern casting shaky circles of light on the frostbitten earth. The last sighting of the man was of his steady form moving away from the warmth of the village, heading toward the watchtower's shadow by dawn. The cart was found alone in the middle of the road, silent and still beneath the pale light of early morning. The hides lay stacked neatly as if placed by a careful hand, the reins looped over the brake in perfect order. But Leofric himself was gone, vanished without so much as a whisper or footprint to betray what had become of him. Whispers began immediately. Some blamed outlaws, desperate men who might have holed up in the tower's ruin, lying in wait for prey. Yet when the reeve organized a search, the hollow walls yielded nothing but the cold echo of boots and the restless flutter of a rook's nest high in the broken beams. The only sign of life was the reeve's mastiff, a dog trained to track thieves and killers. But even the beast balked at crossing the threshold, baring its teeth and growling low, refusing to enter the ruinous gate. Spring came and went, green and brief, but the shadow of the tower lengthened still. One evening, a shepherd, returning from market with tired limbs and weary heart, saw something that chilled him deeper than the frost that had worn into his bones. Near the tower, he saw a light faint, flickering, like a torch carried slowly and deliberately just above the ground. It danced and swayed, rising and falling in the thickening gloom, before drifting under the ruined archway where darkness waited like a hungry beast. No footsteps followed, no voices called out, only the scrape of something heavy being dragged across the stone, an awful sound that clawed at the shepherd's mind. He fled, leaving his flock to find its way home alone, terror driving him faster than hunger or cold. The tale of those taken by the watchtower grew with every lost traveler, the silence around it thickening like a shroud. None who vanished there ever returned. No bodies, no relics, no cries to the heavens, only an absence so vast it swallowed hope whole. Yet after rain, the ground near the tower glistened oddly, the earth studded with tiny beads of glass-like tears frozen in the mud. The old women whispered they were the mournful tears of those claimed by the ruin, their sorrow made permanent in the sodden soil. The young scoffed and called the stories superstition, but none dared travel that road after nightfall. The path itself seemed to recoil from the darkness that pooled beneath the watchtower's broken mouth. Travelers quickened their pace here, crossing themselves as if the act might shield them from unseen eyes. Some claimed they could hear it, then the faint, rhythmic tapping of footsteps, light and urgent, following close behind until the next hill swallowed the sound. The watchtower's silhouette loomed eternal against the sky, a sentinel without soul, watching with empty sockets as the road twisted away, its ruinous frame a monument to forgotten wars, to betrayal and the quiet hunger of death, a tooth broken from the skull of the land, gnashing endlessly at the memories buried beneath its stones. Inside those crumbling walls, the past lingered, thick and suffocating. The tower had seen cruelty and blood, the cold hand of war and the bitter sting of abandonment. It had borne witness to men who crossed lines of loyalty and honor, who traded life for coin and for promises broken in the dark. Its stones absorbed the fears of generations, the silent screams and prayers left unspoken. It was said that long ago, before the tower stood, this land had been a meeting place of shadows, a crossroads for tribes whose blood stained the earth, far deeper than the roots of the oak trees that now clawed at the sky. Some spoke of rituals performed in secret, of sacrifices laid beneath the ground, binding the land in ancient curses. The tower, to some, was more than stone and ruin. It was a prison for the restless dead, a mouth hungry for the living. The Reeves, mastiff, too wise to ignore instinct, had sensed this long before men dared speak it aloud. Its growl echoed the primal warning that the watchtower was no place for the living. And the tapping that followed travelers was not the footfall of man, but the restless pacing of those trapped between worlds. At night, when the wind howled through, the cracks and the moon hung low and pale, the ruins seemed to breathe with a life of their own. The cold seeped deep into the bones of those who dared near, a biting chill that spoke of endings and unquiet souls. Torches flickered at village windows, but none dared shine their light upon the watchtower's shadow, as if fear itself kept the darkness at bay. The road that once carried merchants and pilgrims, song and laughter, was now a place of silence and dread. Where once oxen trampled steadily, Now only the ghosts of lost travelers haunted the ruts and puddles. The cartwheels that once clattered with purpose spun silently in memory alone, swallowed by the slow, patient march of the marsh dot, and still the watchtower waits, its hollow eyes fixed on the road like a beast anticipating its next prey. The ruined archway gapes like a mouth ready to swallow those foolish enough to linger. The earth around it glistens after rain, the tiny beads of glass catching what little light remains, the tears of the vanished shining cold beneath the watchful stones. There is a hunger here, ancient and patient, that will not be sated by reason or prayer. It is a hunger that knows the weight of time and the cost of silence. It reaches for the living with slow fingers, pulling them into the dark without sound or struggle. The path past the watchtower is a thin thread stretched between the living and the lost, a passage where fear walks beside hope and shadows cling like wet cloaks. Travelers who pass hurry their steps, crossing themselves, clutching talismans, whispering prayers to saints who may no longer listen. But some say that the watchtower's hunger can never be outrun. The faint tapping follows, a relentless reminder that the past is never truly gone. It waits just beyond sight, in the silence between heartbeats, in the shadow beneath the stone. And as the road winds onward, disappearing into the night's embrace, the question lingers: what price must be paid to walk its length? What fate awaits those who hear the tapping, who feel the breath of the lost stirring just behind? In the cold hush before dawn, when the world holds its breath and the first stars begin to fade, the watchtower stands alone, its broken teeth biting at the empty sky, guarding secrets that may never find rest. What waits beyond the ruin is a darkness older than memory, and a story that will not end until the last footsteps fade into silence. The road stretches ahead, shadowed and uncertain, beckoning the brave and the foolish alike to follow. But few answer its call, and those who do are never seen again. A low fog had crept from the marshes, rolling silently like a slow tide that swallowed the world whole. It was thick, so thick that the moon's pale light fell soft and blurred, a pale lantern trapped inside a cloud of breath and silence. The road itself seemed to dissolve into the mist, a pale vein threading through a landscape hushed beneath the weight of unseen things. On either side, willows wept long fingers, their branches trailing like ghostly hands just beneath the surface of the air. Brother Aldwin moved cautiously along this spectral path. His footsteps were muffled, swallowed by the thick earth and the mist's heavy embrace. In his hand, the beads of his rosary clicked softly, a fragile counterpoint to the silence that pressed like a shroud. The chest he carried was small, but heavy its weight, a reminder of the relics inside. Splinters from the true cross, wrapped in silk, sealed with wax, entrusted to him by the abbess of Stwaite. Sacred things, meant to ward off darkness and bring hope in a world that often knew only shadow. The air was cold and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth, decaying reeds, and the faint, bitter tang of moss. Somewhere, hidden deep in the fog, a night heron let out a harsh, brittle cry, sharp and sudden, like a broken bone scraping stone. Aldwin whispered a prayer, low and trembling, his words dissolving into the fog as if the air itself refused to carry them. His breath came in small puffs, merging with the mist, disappearing like smoke. Ahead, the lean crossroad shrine loomed, half swallowed by the fog, its weathered wood dark and wet. Flickering votive candles burned there, stubborn. Flames bent sharply to one side, as if leaning towards something unseen in the mist. The shrine seemed alive with silent expectation, a sentinel waiting for what might come. Aldwin's heart quickened. The beads in his hand tightened as footsteps echoed behind him, measured, slow, keeping perfect time with his own. He dared not quicken his pace. He dared not look back. But the sound grew nearer, patient and unyielding. Finally, with a voice caught between fear and resolve, he called into the white stillness, "Who follows?" No answer came. The footsteps matched his pace still, haunting and sure. The air around him thickened, heavier now with an almost tangible presence. Somewhere ahead, the creak of a cartwheel broke the silence dry, slow like wood groaning under the weight of years. The sound stopped abruptly, leaving a ringing stillness that seemed to press inward, closing around Aldwin like the tightening of a noose. Out of the fog emerged a horse's head ditz, bridle slick with damp, its eyes pale, and empty like blind stones sunk deep in a skull. No rider followed, no cart or voice. Only the dangling traces swung gently in the cold air, moving with a ghostly rhythm as if something unseen had just stepped away. Aldwin's knees buckled beneath him. The relic chest pressed heavy against his breast as he tightened his grasp, breath ragged and uneven. The road beneath his feet felt strange, softer, less certain. The packed dirt gave way to silt, as if the earth itself had become water, sucking at his boots with silent hunger. A shape appeared then, gliding forward with a slow, unnatural grace along, bent shadow that moved without sound or breath. Aldwin tried to speak a blessing, words of protection and faith, but his tongue was leaden, his prayers smothered by the thick, wet air. The silence swallowed his voice whole. The shape drifted closer, an ancient sorrow made flesh, and the fog closed behind it like a tomb. When dawn finally bled pale light across the sky, the reeve found only Aldwin's rosary lying abandoned in the center of the road, beads worn smooth, the tiny crucifix dull with mist. The relic chest sat beside it, its wax seal unbroken, the silk inside empty and cold. No sign of the brother, no whisper of where he had gone, only the lingering breath of the marsh and the slow retreat of the mist. The abbess held the empty silk, fingers trembling, the silence between them heavier than any words. In that moment, hope seemed to slip away like the morning fog, vanishing beneath the weight of the unseen. No one ever spoke of what Aldwin faced in that fog, but the old tales say the marshes claim those who carry secrets too heavy for this. The world that sometimes the line between the living and the lost is as thin as a breath on the cold wind. And the relics, no matter how holy, cannot always hold back the shadows that wait in silence. The road to Stonethwaite became a path marked by absence, a place where prayers were whispered but never answered. Travelers crossed themselves as they passed the leaning crossroad shrine, their eyes flickering to the willows whose branches still trembled in the night breeze, like silent fingers reaching out to touch the vanished. And though the candles burned on, their flames bending like beckoning hands into the fog, no one dared follow the light into the shadows. What hunger lies in the mist? What sorrow waits in the silenced road? The answer slipped beyond the dawn, folded into the empty spaces where a man once walked with faith, clenched tight and vanished into the cold embrace of night. The road would wait. The fog would rise again, and the watchful silence would stretch, unendless as a prayer unanswered dot from this quiet loss. The village learned to fear the night more than the day, and the weight of what disappeared beneath the marsh's breath grew heavier in every whispered tale. For every vanished soul, a shadow lengthened a darkness born not of swords or fire, but of the forgotten and the forsaken. And somewhere beyond the reach of torchlight, beneath the heavy silence, the next chapter of their sorrow stirred, waiting, as all things do, for the breaking of dawn. The sun hung low on the horizon, a weary eye bleeding amber and rose across the heavens. As the villagers of Careford watched the last of the day's light slip behind the chalk hills, the air carried a brittle hush, heavier than the quiet of midnight, oppressive stillness that seemed to clutch at the very throat of the earth. Here, in the land torn by King Stephen's endless unrest, the roads had become veins of shadow, arteries winding through a body ravaged by war and fear. Yet the terror that gripped the villagers was not born of clashing swords nor the rumble of war horses pounding the dust. No, it was the silence deep, unnatural, absolute, that spread like a frost upon the northern stretch of the road. The birds, creatures of instinct and freedom, refused to cross above it. Even the restless wind seemed to falter and die, swallowed whole by an invisible maw that whispered of something ancient and unforgiving. Among those who dared to journey these forsaken paths was Edric, a mason of stout heart and steady hand, known in Careford for his craftsmanship and his laughter that echoed like church bells on a clear morning. His tools were simple but well-worn, a satchel of chisels and hammers wrapped carefully in coarse linen, the gift of many long years shaping stone to purpose. His wife Elswith begged him to take the safer route along the river's winding curves, but Edric smiled and shook his head, brushing aside her fears as shadows cast by superstition. No spirit yet, he said, dares strike a man with hammer and chisel in hand. As he stepped onto the path that led through the narrow defile, the sun still shone bright, but the air changed. It thickened and chilled, a subtle pulse that moved like breath across the skin. The chalk walls on either side, white and bright, in the morning, now leaned closer, as if eager to swallow the passing traveler whole. The path beneath his feet seemed less solid, a surface that swallowed sound and light alike. With each step, his boots struck the earth with dull thuds, swallowed of their usual sharp report. Then, from the depths of the defile, a sound emerged, and sonorous, a bell tolling not in joy or warning but in mourning. The strokes were slow, deliberate, spaced like the heartbeat of the earth itself, fading into a silence so deep it pressed against his ears with a weight that felt almost physical. Edric paused. His breath hung visible in the sudden chill, and his fingers tightened on the leather strap of his satchel. He dared a glance upwards, but the sky above, once clear, now seemed cloaked in a pallid veil, as though the sun had been swallowed by a shroud of mist. He pressed forward, each step a struggle against a force unseen but deeply felt, a resistance in the air itself, a thickening shadow that bent the light. The bell tolled again, closer now, its voice rising beyond the realm of metal and flesh. It was not the clang of iron, but the grind of stone against stone, echoing from some cavern deep beneath the ground. The sound roared like the crashing waves of an unseen sea, filling the defile with a terrible power. Suddenly, the very earth beneath Edric's feet changed. The chalk gave way to a surface black as night, smooth and cold as the obsidian heart of the world. The walls, once chalk-white and forgiving, now loomed, towering and grotesque, bending inward as if to trap him in a tomb of stone. In the corner of his eye, shapes moved ghastly and indistinct. Hands, long and gnarled, appeared to reach out. From the shadows, severed from arms, faces without mouths twisted in silent screams. The The satchel in his grasp suddenly felt heavier, the tools inside turning to dust, crumbling away like forgotten promises. A cold sweat broke on his brow as the voices of the dead, if voices they were, whispered in a tongue older than the hills themselves. Edric's heart hammered a desperate rhythm, each beat a plea for escape. He tried to call out, to pray, but the words caught in his throat, smothered by the fog thickening around him. Then, as if the world itself exhaled, the black surface beneath him cracked. Jagged lines spread like veins across the stone, and the bell's toll rose to a deafening crescendo, then ceased as suddenly as it had begun. The shapes vanished, the air cleared, and the sun's pale light filtered once more through the narrowing walls. But Edric was gone. His wife, Ellsworth, braved the road days later, driven by a heart torn between hope and dread. She found no trace, no boot print in the dust, no whisper on the wind, only a new carving on the chalk wall at the defile's mouth. The mason's square and hammer, etched with a precision that seemed impossible, shimmered faintly as if alive, catching the light from some inner fire within the rock. The villagers say the carving grows sharper with each passing summer, deepening, as if cut by the same unseen hand that claimed each brick. And when dusk falls over the defile, the bell still tolls, slow and mournful, echoing the sorrow of those who vanished into its shadow. Some say it is a curse born of the war that tore the land asunder, a restless spirit that marks the price of ambition and pride. Others whisper that the defile is a threshold, a place where the veil between this world and the next wears thin, where those who wander too far are claimed by the earth's hunger. The question lingers like the last wisp of smoke from a dying fire. What fate befell Edric, the mason who mocked fear? Did he fall prey to a darker force beyond mortal reckoning? Or did he cross into a realm where time and stone bend, leaving behind only a whisper and a carving that will never fade? And so the road remains, a scar upon the land, a silence that stretches beyond the walls of chalk and shadow. Travelers quicken their steps, voices falter, and even the boldest dare not linger. For in the stillness of the defile, beneath the watchful eyes of chalk-white cliffs, the bell tolls endlessly, calling out for those lost between stone and sky. The silence grows thicker still, and the road waits patient, eternal and hungry. The tale of Edric is but one thread woven into the tapestry of unrest, where faith and fear entwine in a dance as old as the hills themselves. The defile's shadows stretch long, beckoning to those who listen with more than their ears, drawing them into a mystery carved not only in stone but in the very soul of Careford. And as night falls once more, the question remains, will anyone answer the bell?